You've heard the phrase, right? A deal with the devil. It's this go-to for trading your soul for, power, fame, whatever. But have you ever stopped to think about where that story really started? Because let me tell you, the original version is probably not what you're picturing. So what if I told you the very first deal with the devil wasn't really about ambition at all? What if it was just about raw fear? Yeah, that's what we're going to dig into. We're going to trace this whole legend back to its roots and see how a simple, scary warning morphed into this incredible, complex masterpiece we know today. All right, so our time machine lands in 1587 Germany. We're looking at a book called the Faust book, literally the Faust book. And you've got to think of this thing as the ground zero, the original blueprint for the entire legend. Now, this wasn't some fancy highbrow literature. Oh no, it was more like one of those cheap, sensational pamphlets you'd buy at a market stall, full of thrills and a heavy-handed moral. But here's the thing. Everything that came after, every play, every opera, it all started right here. And the whole point of this original story, it wasn't subtle at all. There's no deep psychological dive here, no artistic ambiguity. Its purpose was simple, direct moral instruction. It was written to scare you straight, to deliver a super clear, straightforward warning. That's it. And this really shows you the night and day difference. On one hand, you have the 1587 version, a totally black and white, unambiguous cautionary tale. Do this, and this bad thing happens. But then you have all the later versions, which are these complex, messy, psychological dramas. The original? No gray areas. Absolutely none. You really have to put yourself in the mindset of someone from the 1500s. For them, evil wasn't some metaphor for your inner struggles. No way. It was a real external force, a literal thing that could physically show up, knock on your door, and drag you off to hell. It was terrifyingly real. So that picture you have in your head of a charming, witty devil, Mephistopheles, just toss it out. In the original Faust book, the devil is a monster. Period. There's no clever wordplay, no tempting debate. It's just a straight-up monster, a physical threat. And that was the entire message, right there. The whole story was built to scream one thing, stray from God's path, and there are dire consequences. Don't be like Faust. It's simple, it's effective, and honestly, it's pretty scary. Pure, direct moral instruction. Okay, but then something really interesting starts to happen. Time passes, the world changes, and the story of Faust starts to change with it. That simple warning, it begins to morph into an exploration of something completely different. The character goes from being just some sinner to, a symbol for all of us. The whole reason Faust does what he does gets turned on its head. See, the original guy was basically just panicking, trying to escape the terrible mess he made. But the new Faust, he's on a mission. He's chasing something. He's deeply unhappy with the limits of being human. He wants more knowledge, more experience, more everything. And this idea is what really powers the modern story. It's this concept of continuous striving. Think of it as this endless, restless itch for more life, more feeling, more experiences. He knows he'll never be fully satisfied, and that's the whole point of the deal. It's not just about power, it's about the chase itself. So, with this new motivation, the story just explodes with complexity. Suddenly, you've got all these new layers. Things like alchemy and magic aren't just tricks anymore. They're symbols for pushing boundaries. The story starts borrowing from ancient Greek myths, and it asks this huge question. What's the difference between knowing a lot of stuff and actually having wisdom? But maybe the biggest change, the thing that really turned this from a simple fable into a heart-wrenching tragedy, was the addition of a new character, Gretchen. Her story shows us the human cost, the real-world collateral damage of Faust's grand ambition. And her story is so much more than a subplot. It's like a mirror reflecting all the cruelty and injustice of what Faust is doing. It makes you face the damage and affliction his quest causes. Suddenly, all those big philosophical ideas become incredibly, painfully personal. Her journey is just brutal. Faust, supernaturally charming thanks to his deal, seduces her. She ends up pregnant and unmarried, which back then was basically a social death sentence. Her community turns on her. She's driven mad. And in her despair, she does something horrible and gets thrown in prison. But right at the very end, she finds a kind of strength and makes a moral choice that Faust seems incapable of.
And this is where you see the huge contrast between them. Faust is all about striving, making deals, taking action. Gretchen just suffers. And when Faust shows up to break her out of jail, she refuses. She accepts her punishment and trusts in God's grace. In the end, she's the one who's saved, not by a deal, but by faith. It's a powerful counterpoint to everything Faust stands for.
So, let's step back. How in the world did we get from a simple little horror story meant to keep people in line to one of the greatest literary works ever? Well, the journey of this legend tells us so much about how we've changed. We went from a world that saw evil as an outside force to one that's obsessed with the darkness and complexity inside our own minds. This timeline really lays it all out, doesn't it? You start in 1587 with the Faustbuch. That's our baseline, the simple moral warning. A few years later, Christopher Marlowe turns it into a play, Dr. Faustus, giving it some real theatrical drama. And then, boom, 1808, Goethe comes along and transforms the whole thing into this massive, profound psychological epic that basically becomes the version of Faust we all know. When you boil it all down, that's the real change, isn't it? The story stopped being about an actual monster out there in the dark and started being about the monster that can live inside of us, that endless striving, that ambition that can be both amazing and really destructive. The whole story just turned inward. And that really leaves us with a pretty big question, one that makes this old story feel brand new. I mean, we might not be signing contracts in blood with the literal devil anymore, but we all make bargains, right? Compromises? So what are the Faustian bargains we make today for progress or knowledge or just that next bit of satisfaction? It's something this whole legend kind of forces you to think about.